Well, here we are, the very end of the week of the worst, which means we are looking at the worst movie I've ever seen, which subsequently has also got the distinction of being the worst spoof movie I've ever seen.
Now there's a title with many contenders.
I'll admit I'm not the biggest fan of spoof movies. There are some good ones like Airplane, Hot Shots, and of course any made by Mel Brooks are amazing. But I don't know, I've always found them a bit awkward and not as funny as other comedies. And I know one of the problems with spoof movies is that they age about the same rate as an adult Mayfly, which is why they often stuck to spoofing things that were considered timeless for a while. Which is why when Scary Movie came out, that's when things started to go downhill. I'm not going to go into a long and detailed history of the downfall of spoof movies. The Nostalgia Critic did that and did an excellent job of documenting it. So check that out if you're curious. But basically, when spoof movies tried to be more topical, adding in as many references to other films, TV shows, and other things that were popular at the time as they possibly could, even if they didn't relate to the main spoof target, or even if they weren't funny, and their obnoxious annoying level was cranked up to 11,000, that was the point where spoof movies began to die. Scary Movie does have some funny moments in it, but it's overall not very funny, and it was just the tip of the iceberg. After it was a big hit, two of its writers then decided to go it alone without the Wayans brothers. Which I would say that was a smart move, but these guys are so bad they made us pine for even the Wayans.
Oh boy, that must be bad.
Going by the joint name of Seltzerberg, they made their first duo effort of Date Movie. And while not the worst movie, it was the worst spoof movie made at that time. But they weren't done, as they kept making more, which culminated in their ultimate disaster of a movie. Disaster Movie.
A rare case where the movie's title acts as a perfect review of the movie itself.
Yeah, self-reviewing movie titles. It makes our job a lot easier. Now, here's the only movie of the whole week where I don't need to give a plot synopsis, because there isn't one. It's a spoof movie made after Epic Movie, so it's either directly spoofing the plot of another movie, or it hasn't got a plot and it's all just a bunch of unconnected sketches. Funny how most of the movies we looked at this week can fall under that category. The film spoofs just about every movie that was a big deal in 2007 and 2008. Hancock, The Hulk, Hellboy, 10,000 BC, Kung Fu Panda, Juno, Crystal Skull, American Gladiators. Okay, and the Sex and the City movie. Why would you need to spoof that? That's a movie that's so bad it's almost a self-parody. They also go for some topical humour outside of movies and TV shows with spoofing celebs like Amy Winehouse.
Piss off! You don't want to mess with a bitch straight out of rehab.
Oh yeah, making jokes about Amy Winehouse being a mess with dodgy teeth in 2008. No one's done that one yet. And it speaks volumes of the kind of jokes that we have here and their quality when the first gag of the movie is a person being flung face first into dung.
An apt metaphor for what it's like to watch this movie.
There is some kind of overarching theme with an encroaching disaster, but that's not enough to tie everything together into an actual coherent story. Magnolia and Memento have more coherent narratives than this. But hey, there are some spoof movies out there where the story is more of an afterthought, and it's just a convenient excuse to make some jokes. And if the jokes are good, then who cares?
I think there's a key word in that sentence that can never be applied to this movie.
And what's that?
Good.
Yep, you got it in one. Nothing about this movie is good. All the movies I've watched this week, there's at least been one good thing in them, or something that even if I didn't like it, I could appreciate. Here, no. There is nothing good. One of the key elements that makes this movie suck so much is the acting. All across the board, it's terrible. And I know you might say, oh, it's a spoof movie, it doesn't need to have good acting. Wrong! You have to have the best kind of acting in these kind of movies. Being an actor in a spoof movie is one of the most difficult challenges you can face as an actor, as you're imitating the performance of somebody else, and you try and make it seem as much like that performance as you possibly can, but you still have to make it funny at key moments where it needs to be funny. And that is insanely difficult. And that's why a lot of the really good spoof movies got extremely talented actors back in the day. Gene Wilder, Peter Boyle, Leslie Nielsen, John Candy, Rick Moranis, Charlie Sheen. These are actors who are not just good dramatic actors, but they were the top of their field when it came to comedic acting. Whereas since Scary Movie, most of the cast for spoof movies is just made up of nobodies. They're clearly just riff-raff studio brats that they picked up without even giving them an audition and just told them, act silly whilst wearing this costume. Spoofs work when it feels like you're still watching a movie that's trying to be serious, but there just happens to be silly things in them. And granted, getting that balance is unbelievably hard, but here, the filmmakers weren't even trying. I've seen more subtlety and nuance when 9-year-olds spoof movies by replacing random words of dialogue with the word penis. And I know that spoofs tend to take place in a kind of hyper-reality so that it can seem more absurd and cartoony but feel natural, but there needs to be a limit. You need to know when to stop, and this movie doesn't even know the meaning of the word. It's just total excess with no sense of restraint or self-awareness. There are even some moments where they spoof specific scenes from other movies that had better jokes in them.
Get your punk ass up, fly down there and fix that shit.
And even when just looking at the cast acting as comedic acting separate from trying to spoof another person's performance, it's terrible. They seem so confused and awkward, like they don't know what they're doing. Which, to be fair, they probably didn't, because so much of this movie just feels like they pissed around on set for a day, filmed it, and threw it together in an editing studio.
Another thing that people have said about our show.
Quiet you. But that's only the first problem. The second is that they don't give the movie time to breathe or pace it well. It's just joke, joke, joke every 5 seconds. In a TV show, that could work. But this is a movie. The audience can't follow along when you've got a joke every other nanosecond. They don't have the attention power to absorb everything that they've seen. Even an ADD-riddled child wouldn't be able to take it all in.
Lord, it's all for Jesus. Put your pants back on, Dad. Go, Romo. Oh my God, he's got to score a basketball. Wait, what's it called again?
That was about 5 jokes in one sentence there. Just pick one and actually make it good. I mean, within the first 5 minutes, the caveman from 10,000 BC meets an American gladiator, fights him, and then runs off. Why? No reason. It's just something we can reference, so we have to put it in, even if there's no connection, no point, and no actual funny things being said in there. The whole writing process of this movie just feels like a child took an issue of Empire, ate it, threw them up onto a notepad, and whatever order they came out in, that was how he was going to write his movie, no matter how little sense it makes. All of these jokes could have easily have just been sketches on something like Mad TV or SNL, and they would have been much better there, mostly because they would have had way better writers handling them. Yes, the writers of Mad TV are still better than the writers of this movie. Really think about that for a second. But, of course, as expected, the biggest sin of this movie, and it's something that the previous problems do contribute to, but it's still an issue on its own, it's just not funny. The movie breaks every single rule in the comedy rulebook. Bad timing, explaining the jokes, lowbrow humor but with no wit to offset or justify it, no sense of place or presence, doesn't let the jokes just end, doesn't let the jokes just happen, telegraphs the jokes to the audience from a mile away, no sense of natural flow from one joke to the next, never having a joke be smarter than the audience. Every single comedian's rule is shattered here and shit on remorselessly. This is honestly one of the hardest movies to review, since it's just more and more terrible with every increasing second. And it's so hard to explain how bad it is without just making you watch it from the beginning to the end, which is something I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. Yes, I wouldn't even wish this on Steve reviews, that's how bad it is. There's so much I could complain about in this movie beyond its just bad comedy, like how the cinematography is awful and oversaturated and cheap looking, the editing is terrible because nothing naturally flows together, the costumes are awful, and not even in a good way where they look like they're deliberately bad for the sake of comedy. They just look ugly. The music is terrible, and the fact that some of the spoofs they were doing were on films that they clearly never even saw, they just spoofed whatever they knew about it from seeing the trailer or the poster. But really, does it even matter? When your comedy is this bad, nothing else matters. The movie has been at the top of IMDb's bottom 100 for close to a decade now, which, given how much that list changes every year, that's saying a lot. And this is one of the few placements on that list that I totally agree with it being being there. In fact, I'd like to start adding minus numbers to that list because this movie proves that you can go beyond the number 0 when it comes to being terrible. This isn't even a comedy so bad that it has a weird loopback effect and starts becoming funny because it's so unfunny, like Freddy Got Fingered. It's just awful. And to make something so unfunny that I can't even laugh at it for being unfunny, that's a special kind of achievement in horrible. Oh, and of course, pointless celebrity cameos in there.
What's up, baby?
Those guys are trying to steal our booze.
You know you've hit bottom once you've hit Kim's bottom.
I think that was in Kanye's wedding vows.
Actually, I think they figured out a way to make this movie go further than bottom by having her and Carmen Electra catfight. Ignoring how I don't really think catfights are sexy anyway, Kim's got the perfect finisher move. She could sit on her. Oh, what? That one doesn't get a rim shot?
I guess whoever our drummer is isn't into butt shaming.
Well, to be fair, most of the time it's not her, it's a stunt double. This movie also possibly has the worst joke I've ever seen in my life, and I feel ashamed even talking about it. In fact, I don't even want to show it to you, but I feel like I must because this joke is possibly the worst joke of all time. So if you want to skip it, here's the time code because it does talk about some very triggering topics. But for those willing to venture beyond the bad joke barrier, here we go.
Junie, why won't you have an abortion? You're not exactly part of the Christian coalition. I could just grab a wire hanger and do it myself.
I think that just about sums up the whole movie in a few seconds. Now, I will be fair, Airplane did have a very similar joke, and it wasn't very good there either, but it was a quick joke that went by and it wasn't focused on too much, and even there it was a little bit more tasteful.
There's just no stopping in a white zone.
Oh, really, Vernon? Why pretend? We both know perfectly well what it is you're talking about. You want me to have an abortion.
It's really the only sensible thing to do. If it's done properly, therapeutically, there's no danger involved.
Hey, I said a little bit. This... I don't even think I have to explain why this is awful. I've done some near-the-knuckle jokes before, but I'd never ever go that far. The final song at the end of the movie gets close to being just as bad, but I seriously don't think anything will top this in my life. This is a new one to beat for awful jokes for me, and I really hope nothing breaks it, because my god, if some joke out there is worse than this, I think that's the end of comedy and humanity. And what a perfect note to end the week of the worst on. With all this trash I've had to sit through this week, there's only one thing left to do.
What's that?
This.
And that is the end of the week of the worst, and ending in the best possible way for me. But now, I'm going on the other side to wash the filth of these movies off of me.
I wanna die. I don't wanna live anymore. I really wanna die so bad. Please return me to the dark abyss. I long for death's sweet kiss. Everybody sucks and nobody is cool, and every day I'm still alive is